Counselor Accents Podcast. Two school counselors who love their jobs. Oh, and they happen to have Southern accents too. Bless their hearts.
I am Kim Crumbly.
I'm Laura Rankhorn.
And together we are Counselor Accents. And Laura, it's payback.
It is payback, yes.
And I snuck a little interview in without you. I just wanted you to feel hurt people. And I want you to feel how I felt.
Well, I deserve it. I'm not even mad about it, except the only reason I am mad is because I really wanted to talk to this guest that we have on this episode, and you hogged her. You hogged them. I think that the four of us together would have been great, and now
it could not have been better. It could not have been better. I mean, I don't want to hurt your feelings by saying that. It just could not have been better. And so I don't know. This could be the end, the beginning of the end.
Well, you're out of town now, so I'll see what all I can do while you're gone.
Yes. I hear you. I hear what you're up to. No way. As you can see, I am already retired. If you're watching, I'm already retired for the day. What is that? What am I, Hugh Hefner or something? My robe? I've retired. I don't know what to say.
There's so much I want to say there, but I
don't even know. I'm past my bedtime, so I can't even think correctly. But you are in for a treat. We met this lady when we were speaking in Tennessee, and she drove from Nashville a couple of hours, and we got to meet with her for just a bit and had a really great conversation with her. So I know you were excited to meet with her because we had a really good conversation. And this is a topic that I really can't believe we have not delved into already.
Yeah.
And it is about addiction. And we deal with students every day who live in either a world of addiction. And the thing about this, and you're going to see, I'm not going to give away anything, is that there are things available when we're dealing with older students, but there's not a lot when there are small ones who are living in this. And so this is a good resource. So this was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with this. And you were supposed to be on here, but in the real world, in the real school counseling world, as every school counselor knows, even though it's the end of the day and it's time to go home, that does not always mean that you get to go home.
I can't tell you how many guests we have had to send an emergency message to saying, oh my goodness, I'm sitting with the kid underneath the table. Can we reschedule? And all of our guests are so gracious because they get it. They're either out in the real world with us, or they have been and they remember. And they say, absolutely, students come first. And so, so this was one of those days where I can't remember. I think I was with my principal. I think we had to get
something that happened and you just couldn't.
Yeah.
Just couldn't get away. And I said, do you want to wait on Laura? And they were like, absolutely not. Not church. Absolutely not. So we barreled ahead, but I am excited for you to get to hear this.
Well, I love that I came in right at the end when you were like bad mouthing me, and
we were caught. We were caught
in. Yeah.
Yes, we were caught. But yes, you popped in and caught me bad mouthing you. But anyway, but you did miss it, so you're gonna, with our listeners, are gonna enjoy this. Yes. All right. Enjoy.
Okay. I am Kim Crumbly, and as you will notice, Laura Rankhorn is not here, and I'm very happy about that. I'm glad because I can get a word in edgewise. So I am going to introduce two friends. One I have met, Trish. We met, and we'll talk about that just a little bit. We met briefly, and I'm going to let you guys just introduce yourselves. Y'all are accomplished women, and I've read your bios, and I know y'all do great and wonderful things. So tell me a little bit about where you are right now. I always like to know, because of the accent thing, where's everybody at today?
Are you?
Where are you in the world?
Counselor accents.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
Janet, you want to go ahead?
Sure. I'm in New York. I'm in Westchester County, just north of New York City. And that's why I have this accent.
And I love it. I love it.
Right. We grew up on Long Island, but both of us have managed to,
Tamp it down.
right. We could talk like that if you guys want to do an accent.
I
a real
love
accent.
it. Yes.
Come on, Trish. Come on,
Yeah.
Patty.
Compete
She was
against
Patty
your
growing up.
Southern as fast as we need to. You know, we can just talk
It's
it
like
up.
you're a chameleon. It's like, what do we need to do? And I always say Laura's hair could either be Jersey Shore or Nashville, Tennessee. I mean, she's from Tennessee, and I'm like, this could you have to really hear your accent to know, are you Jersey girl? Are you Nashville girl? Because,
Well, we would make it very clear that Laura's not a Jersey girl. But
okay.
the hair may get her in. So I'm in Nashville now. I've been here 30 years. So as Janet said, for sure, tamp down that New York. But a funny story just about accents is when I was about 19, I was a flight attendant for a company called Eastern Airlines, which half of the people who will hear this will never even know what that is, but it was the largest airline in the world. So I was a flight attendant and I was based out of Miami, and I would fly all over, and people would say, where are you from? And I was living in Florida. So I would say Fort Lauderdale. And they would be like, no, like, so where are you originally from? So I was like, I'm going to let you guess. So that was really my wake up call in the world, that I talked funny. And
Absolutely.
It was Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale.
Well, Lauderdale,
I don't
Florida.
say it like that anymore. So then I practiced Fort, Lauderdale. So now I can say it Fort Lauderdale instead of Fort
And the
Lauderdale.
thing is, I never practiced. So Laura,
Right, exactly. Kim, you just embraced.
We just embrace, and she, if you're from South Alabama, it is very like, welcome y'all to Alabama. And then the north part is more hill, the hill country, Irish. And so Laura and I sound a lot alike, even though she's from Tennessee. But
That's
know
right.
that being from Nashville and around the.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Janet, you're still in.
I am. New York. I'm still in New York.
I do hear it.
I never left.
I do hear it. New York. I did hear it.
New York. And if you hear us say, because we both say, well, maybe you don't say it so much anymore, Trish, we say Florida. Where's our brother live? Florida. And
that is so funny.
Not Florida.
Right.
Florida. That's right.
And we eat oranges, not oranges.
And we eat oranges.
That's right.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's so interesting. It's so, but
it is really interesting.
I love it. That kind of thing. Laura would be going, "Oh, move on, Kim." But I love it. I love to know where people
see where people are from and how that impacts just sort of everything, and what we think about when we hear people speak. Even
yes, exactly. It's so interesting to me. So, but Trish, you and I met in Tennessee. Laura and I were speaking at a Swanee, near Swanee, Tennessee. It was at SEL that we were speaking mental health issues, and you were there, and we had a great conversation. And I have to say, you're beautiful, and your sister now I see she is too, but just so attractive. And we didn't get to speak very long, but it was so impactful what you were saying to us, and it's something that Laura and I have known for a long time.
Needs attention.
That absolutely needs attention. For us, and this whole conversation that we're going to have today, and we may veer off, and that's fine wherever we're led. But this conversation is about addiction today that we're going to be talking about, which is a really hard topic to talk about. But we do know that we deal with students who have family members with addiction problems. And we are dealing with middle schoolers and high schoolers with addiction problems. So it is all around us. We know that it's epidemic levels, and I can only imagine, and you guys can probably address this more, it's even more so after or during this
COVID,
pandemic
for
that we've
sure.
gone through. But you introduced me to a book, and before we get into the book, and the book is called Timbi Talks about Addiction. I'm going to just show it to the people who are going to be viewing this. Most of our people are listeners, but this is an incredibly beautiful book. But not only is it beautiful to look at, it is so well written. And all I could do was just clap and cheer because we have so few resources for littles, which is where they don't understand. And the stuff that you address in this book, I want to talk about. But first of all, tell me, where did this come from? And a little bit about the story behind this.
Sure. So the origin of Timbi was my family story. My children's father suffered from substance use disorder. And I was just completely overwhelmed. I had no understanding of this. My children were very young. I was terrified. I just kept thinking there has to be an answer to this, or, this is when 28-day treatment programs were kind of, I feel like, new. This was in the early 80s. And as his disease progressed, our family was more and more impacted. And, I always describe when we came together, it was in total love. He was family. My whole family loved and adored this man. He was a fireman. He was a police officer. He was a helper. But he was also had the disease of addiction. And we had a whole future planned out. We had these two wonderful children, and he was entrepreneurial. At the time, we were doing Flip That House before it was a TV show. I mean, he was so ahead of his time in these things. But
incredibly handy.
As the addiction progressed, we literally lost everything. We owned a bunch of homes. He had a side business. He had his job. And we ended up having to move from Florida to Tennessee, where my mother lived, because I had a 2 and a 3-year-old and I had no help. There was no support. But at that time, when my kids were this age, I knew that they knew something's not right. Something's happening here. What's happening to our family? But I had nothing to talk to them about. So, sort of my frustration, Kim, was there are books about everything: becoming a brother, having a nighttime fears, sharing. And there was even books about pooping, that everybody poops, right? So it was like, we can talk about all these things, but yet we're not going to have a way to talk about this. So this just piled on this sense of shame and stigma and isolation of really walking this very difficult path by myself. So I used to say to my kids, your daddy has a problem and you can't see it. It's on the inside. So he looks like other mommies and daddies would. But when his problem starts to take over, things change. So I just undertook by myself to just write a little story. And it was originally called My Daddy Has a Problem. And at the time, you're reading to young children in rhyme. And Dr. Seuss was a big, author that we read to. So I thought, just to have that little rhythmic sense of the story, kind of a sing-songy, takes a little bit of the sting out of what the conversation. But it was, I have a piece of paper back from then that I had written down, and it was, what are your goals for this? And it was to end the stigma. I mean, it was like before hashtags were hashtags, I was saying end the stigma. Let kids know they're not alone and that it's not their fault. So that's something that we dig into a little bit later. But so that was my original goal. Just My Daddy Has a Problem. I tried to get this book published. This was when you had to send off just the words on paper to publishers, and you were just at their mercy of what they wanted to talk about or not. And it just was resoundingly rejected by anybody that I sent it to. They just said, thank you. This is just not something that we want to talk about, especially with young children, was, what I was told directly, especially with little children. And I just kept thinking, well, then what? Because it doesn't go away. These experiences these children are having are not taken away because we don't talk about them. In fact, we know this doubles down on their sense of shame, on the secrets. And so eventually I just had to put the book away and just move on with my life. And we coped, and I found whatever help I could with my children. But I found even then, Kim, whenever I would speak about it or say, oh, my kid's dad struggles with, addiction, alcohol. These are people at church, at school. All of a sudden, you just saw that little bit of difference. And maybe they didn't want their kids coming over for a play date or something.
And sometimes not so little.
Right.
As in the kids weren't allowed to come over for a play date.
Right. So, again, it just, as a society, I think we've come a long way of not blaming the person with the disease, and we acknowledge it more as a disease than a moral failure. But there's still so much stigma and just shame and embarrassment. And look, it's still not easy or fun to talk about. I have become much more comfortable over all these years of just, I'll be the first one to say, look, this is happening in my family. It continues to happen in my family. There are things that people would find embarrassing to have to admit are happening. But if somebody isn't out there saying these things or looking, I'm like saying, if you met me on the street, you wouldn't think, oh, this lady or, her grandkids or what's happening with you. So it's important to have that voice and have that face to say, this is the face of addiction. It wasn't me, but my family. So and the other focus is, thank God we're helping the person suffering from the disease and the addiction, but it impacts the whole family. So I am here to talk about the spouse, the significant other, the parent, the children,
the grandparents who end up having to take the caregiving in.
Right. So again, I just had to put the book away and move on. And I always say that, but it didn't leave our family, and the impact is still very deeply felt and evident in this multi-generational thing. Janet and I grew up with two parents who were adult children of alcoholics. We did not experience alcoholism or addiction in our home growing up, but all the isms are there.
But both of our grandfathers were, alcoholics, and we, sometimes we couldn't go see, grandpa because he was sick. And both of our grandfathers, granddaddy would have to get put to bed, or kids don't go in the house,
Yeah. Right. There's a situation there. So, trying to do that and get the word out there for somebody else who might need it was just kiboshed back then. Well, fast forward, and I have two adult children. They're 33 and 34. My son seems to have navigated and kind of come through. Not unscathed, but he's not in addiction.
The older of the two.
Right. And so things were a little bit different. He also had access to a few more programs that were available to my daughter. And that's not to say like that's the cause or the blame, or I'm just saying I have these two children, and one, again, sort of came through with less issues. But my daughter struggles very, very mightily with this disease, and She has 2 daughters, my granddaughters, who are 9 and 10, and she currently has no visitation or custody with them because her addiction got out of control. And as we know, so back in the 80s, when it was their dad, who eventually lost his life to an overdose of OxyContin, he had had knee replacement surgery. And they just, at the time, this is when they were prescribing like a bucket of the OxyContin.
Yeah.
And you just can't do that with someone in recovery. There wasn't even a discussion about,
Yeah.
it was like, oh no, these aren't addictive because you're in pain, like no problem here. So he's part of those huge statistics that we are all seeing now. But anyway, my daughter switched from pills, as most people then do, to heroin and meth, but it's all laced with fentanyl. And we were very close to losing her. And right now she is in recovery and working a program and in sober living. And we're actually looking to have her go to another kind of longer program to just help with her trauma. Just that those ACEs, those things that we didn't really know how to give her a sense of control and agency to combat those. Everybody was doing the best they can, right? I mean, at least we were talking about it and saying it's not your fault. So, I guess it was Janet in 2004 that we had started to have a conversation about we need to, not 2004, look at me.
14.
14.
Right.
How am I doing?
Right. I was like,
dropped a decade out. Jen's like, really? No,
just
2014.
dropped a decade. Okay.
That, it was starting to become very public. The opioid crisis was getting all this attention. Purdue Pharma was starting to get in trouble. There was like, a mood in the air of, hey, we have a real problem. We're losing. This is something else I talk about is, we would pay attention if we really think about it's 130 people, which the numbers are higher now, are dying a day from overdose. And that's like a Southwest flight dropping out of the sky. And if that were and you just don't know where it's going to drop, right? It could be in Alabama, it could be in Tennessee, it could be in New York, and you're like, and it's everybody. It's not just a particular class or color, race of people. It's a non-discriminatory disease. Anybody can suffer from it. So we've got to do something about it, right? And then my daughter was struggling, and now I'm watching my grandchildren experiencing this same thing. So I just said to her, and Janet has a master's in mental health counseling and is
I was just finishing my degree in 2014.
Right. Yeah. So, and is Janet did sort of like a concentration in mindfulness practices and was with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, studied Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And I mean, Janet, you should name.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, that was, I had an interest in mindfulness and meditation and had struggled with, really developing a practice. And it was one of the courses that I was taking for my master's where I was getting a grade for it, so I had to do it. And but and I did. So it sort of, I started seeing the benefits in my own brain, and I worked in a school, which is how I went to get my master's in the first place, because I was IT. I was I ran the computer lab in IT it was a very tiny school in New York, which is no longer with us, sadly. COVID took it out. But it
was a school for children who have learning differences.
Some kids, but I don't have to tiptoe around it anymore. Largely, the population was made up of kids who struggled in regular normal school. They
got you. Yeah.
Right. So like it was an alternative program, kind of.
Yes.
But it was very college prep, anyway. So kids would come into the computer lab and, just start, telling me things that their friend was thinking about killing themselves, or and I was like, what, how do what do I do? So I would go tell and there was no counselor in the school.
There wasn't
it was that
school
tiny
counselor.
Right.
And that's the school that you really needed one, it sounds like.
Right.
Because
100%.
Yeah.
So I thought, at least, I'm going to go and, learn how to talk to kids so I can
the
say.
goal was to be the school counselor there, but I mean, it's just a complicated process. But anyway, in those studies, Janet really did this deep dive into how to combat ACEs. I mean, acknowledging and understanding adverse. So this is where things started to get labeled, right? We knew that kids were just having a hard time. They were being exposed to things that they shouldn't see. But then what are you going to do about it? So it's one thing to name, normalize, verbalize, give language to and words to children who need to hear this. But then it's another thing of, how is this message delivered? So co-regulation, right? Getting yourself in a space where you are going to be able to share this with this child who's at an excited level. So the grounding, the deep
somehow dysregulated could be, too low of energy state, but so you can work on ways to bring the child up to right. So,
but it's yourself being aware of that. But the beauty of the book, and one of the things that we worked for 4 years before we got the book printed, we sent this out to, had we known you, Kim, like you would have gotten a copy, and we wanted to hear feedback from school counselors, therapists, psychologists, social workers, people on the front line, hitting these kids. So that is why I changed from my daddy has a problem to naming the character and saying the word addiction and talking about addiction and saying that word. And one of the most beautiful things that I have gotten to see in the time since it's been published, and we've gone into schools, and I get the whole population of kids, and Timbi just talks about addiction. And that's not saying that you have this in your home, but it's saying this is a disease that impacts, and it might not be you, but it could be your friend. And you can be a better friend if you know about this and what this is. And it's not the parents' fault. They didn't choose it. So there's so many little precious things that are dropped in these, what is it, Janet, 28 pages or something?
Pages, yeah.
So that was the real job too, is compressing this down, still getting a meaningful message across, but where very young kids could
zeroing in on the age group is what we first had to do.
Right. So that's something else, Kim, working in schools and in books and reading, there's pretty finite age group. So they like 3 to 8, and then 9 to 12 is typically the breakdown. So, the focus was definitely on the 3 to 8, right? So then the feedback that we got there was, a lot of these children who need this book have not had consistent schooling or help at home. So they may be behind on reading. So they didn't want us to limit or have a kid feel who's maybe 10 or 11, right? Say, well, I
just don't want to read a baby book.
I don't need that. So we very specifically, and I can tell you from, I read from pre-K to 5th grade, and those 4th and 5th graders, they eat this up and they take it in. And I have grown-ups who come up to me crying, saying, I needed Timbi. So it never goes away to have someone acknowledge the hardest thing that you're experiencing at home that you have most likely had to keep a secret. So to see it on a page spoken about in a gentle, loving, and captured in these gorgeous paintings. She was 19.
Good. I was going to say, you have to tell them about
our
Mackenzie.
Illustrator. I found this young woman, and the first time I saw her work, I was like, physically felt my heart explode. Like, I have to have this young woman.
It is beautiful. They're beautiful.
So Janet and I each they are watercolor paintings. And anytime she had to change something, she had to start that whole painting over again.
So we tried not to do that too much.
Right. We did.
I bet. Yeah.
But the beautiful thing too, Kim, there are like little, we would say, okay, here's kind of the scene we want to see and like the emotion that we'd like Timbi expressing, and then just let her go. And the incredible detail. So what we wanted to is when the child is reading the book, and this is something else, the book is a landscape, which, everything was done with a purpose in mind, because when you're holding a book open for a small child and it's across your lap, there's just more of a scene to see, and you can just get lost in those pages. And Mackenzie just has this beautiful little detail, like the toys in the classroom. Or one of the things we loved is when Timbi comes and talks to the teacher, when after this last scene of, this body telling him something's not right, going to the teacher is on her knees holding Timbi's hands and looking. And that's something just, you talked about, is getting on the kids' level, talking in a softer voice. And that's part of the co-regulation and seeing them and not standing over a child. So really getting right on their level so that there's a safe space. So it's finding a safe, trusted adult, having that person understand where you are, first tuning into your body to recognize that something's not right. So Janet, that was this is again, her.
Right. This was, we're, in the early, 20 teens, it was when I was reading lots of Dan Siegel, the, interpersonal neurobiology. And it's really, the focus was more on body-based treatments. We're definitely working for traumatized people, and just people who struggled with any mental health issue. The body-based interventions for many, if not most people, are just simply more effective, because the body and the brain are not separate. They're, and I don't know if there's, and I can't discuss it, knowledgeably, but Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory is, that is just really tying that up. There's a gigantic vagus nerve that is, sends 80% of the messages go up to the brain, and
from the body.
Right, from 80% of the nervous fiber goes, up to the brain. And
so that was, job one: name it, validate it, give some language, take away the shame and stigma. It's not your fault. This is a disease. Nobody chooses it. And now, listen, sometimes things happen that you don't want to see. You're exposed to scary, weird, hard experiences. So now what can you do? You can find a safe adult, but sometimes, and one of the deeper conversations that we're having now is just as a society, how can we make it safe for someone to report that something's happening without the fear of, well, you're going to take my parent away, or I'm not, I could be put in foster care. I'm going to be separated from my siblings. So they think I'm just going to stay here and suffer through this, and we'll figure it out. But then we know the impact of all that is the long-term outcome of people with significant ACEs. Their life prognosis is just, and look, we're not our ACEs score, but we can see now, we work with the National Alliance of Drug Endangered Children. And one of the officers there was saying, he was out in the force, he was a first responder. And he said, we'd go into these meth labs, and he said, I was just stepping over kids to get to the person I needed to arrest. He said, and then all of a sudden the light went off, and I'm realizing, hey, in 15 years, I'm going to be arresting this kid that I'm stepping over. So if we don't do something to deal with these kids, because it's not going to turn out okay. If all of these things are happening to a child and we don't give them some tools, then, I mean, we're paying this price with a life of a person, but it just ends up being more costly. There's more incarceration, there's lower job, and just life skills that these kids are able to then have a more productive life.
Their life source, their life energy is spent on, protecting themselves,
right.
not on growing, not on learning, not on being open. It's all closed up, and there's all of their body, their life force is consumed by this.
And this
how could they possibly
be
not
learning
suffer
in school? And
it affects everything. Absolutely. It affects everything.
We have in the back of the book, Janet calls it the refrigerator sheet. That is just a nice
my
list.
printer is not cooperating today. That's what I sent in the we thought that would be good for the show notes.
Absolutely.
So it's just if you need like a quick reminder, and this is the other thing, Kim, that we say, I say to all the kids when I go in and talk to them, it doesn't matter if this is happening in your family or not. You have some stress. Every person does, even if it's just a disappointment of you couldn't get a puppy. And it doesn't go away when you become an adult. So we all need coping skills. So really at the third chunk or the third piece of our heart in this is to equip children, whether they're alone or with a trusted adult, on how to self-regulate and gain this much needed sense of control in this chaotic life that they're having around
agency
them.
Is the word, right? It's believed that at the heart of lots of trauma, or something that exacerbates trauma, is this lack of agency, and people feeling like there's nothing they can do. And so Timbi gives kids and the adults who are reading the book to them skills for learning that in fact you can calm yourself down,
right?
Simply by breathing.
And the thing about absolutely, and the thing about this book is that it you could use it for more than addiction. What you're saying when you're reading this to a class, even if it's not hitting them with that addiction, it brings out that those regulation skills that we are trying to teach, the breathing and the. But I think that we struggle with, that is one of the standards. This is one of the things that we do, not necessarily written as a standard that we're going to deal with drugs and alcohol, but safety for ourselves. It is. And also we observe some states do, some don't, but we do set aside a month in October to address. And one of the things that we found out really quickly was we're dancing around this addiction problem with the littles, and we're not really, and they're living in this hard reality.
100%.
And we're dancing around and calling it, I think every year we find lessons on and how to take don't take the wrong medicine. And that really is not addressing what they're living in, what a lot of our kids are living in, is that addiction. And I think those numbers are much higher. Like you said, the kids keep it quiet. They know to keep it quiet. They're told to keep it quiet, and they are afraid and they are ashamed. That's right. But I agree that this book is for littles all the way up through. I use picture books in middle school.
100%.
So a beautiful picture book, and it does for dip, because it brings in the breathing and the the
grounding and
the grounding. So it does help with a lot of problems, but I think it is done so beautifully and so carefully that it's just handled in such a very careful manner but you're saying addiction, you're saying what it is, but it would have to be a hard thing to do because you still are dealing with small children.
100%. I mean, it was.
But this, I would not be afraid to use with, and I'm saying this to my fellow school counseling friends, I would not be afraid to use this book. Timbi Talks About Addiction, Helping Children Cope with a Parent's Addiction. I would not be afraid that, of anything that is said in this book. It is beautiful. And the great thing is that I love the coloring book that I have, and you can tell how this, if they go together or they're separate or whatever. But the thing about the coloring book is this is a great small group tool too. You got whole group. And then when you pull that small group, because I have had parents who have said they need help because, parents on addiction. And so to pull that into a small group setting, you've got the tools that you need here. So also, I want you to talk about this but even more so the tiny bear. I'm holding up our listeners.
My God.
The Timbi bear, Trish, that it comes in this beautiful. And let me just say, Laura and I are not getting a kickback. This is because I don't want people to think we're selling, but we're not. It's nothing that we're getting from this other than we realize, Laura and I, that there are, when we both looked into this, we were like, this is something we just don't have enough resources for. And it is a very real problem. And it comes with this stuffed bear that is Timbi, which is absolutely amazing, and the little bear,
Tiny Timbi.
And who I just showed you, my son, when he saw all this, of course, he had to get into it,
of course,
and investigate everything.
Everybody does.
Yeah, it is.
My granddaughter carries 2 of them around. She has 2 in her crib.
Yes, so they're beautiful. They're beautiful. So we will, talk to us about how folks who are interested in bringing this into their school, where can they get these resources?
So I do want to say that, so we wrote the book, and then I felt like the character needed to come to life. I really wanted to see the character because I can remember what I felt like with my kids. We'd go to the bookstore and there was like Lily's plastic purse, and, there was a little Lily doll in the purse. And so that always felt like you were special, or like, wow, you're so cool. You got the character. And if anybody needed an actual hug from a character, it's these kids. So at the end of the book, it says, and here's a big hug from your new Timbi. And Janet will confess now, she fought me on it. She was like, I don't think we need that now. I'm like, girl, we need this now. So went through getting the big Timbi. And then what we were finding is people wanted more from Timbi. Like, how can we deepen the message there? And so we went to work on the workbook, and Janet and
we were, I have to say, when you said how well, how carefully worded it is, we were talking about addiction, try doing that in rhyme, Kim. Okay?
As I read it, I thought this is a miracle. They are able to get a very strong message in rhyme that kids are going to tune into because they're going to love, to hear that rhythm and rhyme.
Right.
And that's why it took 4 years.
I believe it.
And we would sit there. And the way we did it was we were on Google Docs, and then we would be on speakerphone. And we would be writing for hours a day. And sometimes we'd have to be like, because she's talking and she has her way of working, and I'm talking and I have my way of work. And I'd be like, girl, I got to call you back because you're driving me crazy. I can't even listen right now.
Yes.
Or stop talking.
Right. That's it. So Janet was like the rhythm queen,
because Trish was all ready to hop off.
Yes.
And I would have it and I'd be like, no, you could say it like, and then I blah, blah. She's like, no, that is not the right, so we had all the
Cadence.
numbers.
You had to get that cadence, didn't you? That
Exactly.
right, like,
Yes.
yeah.
Right.
And we didn't want it to be like forced. So it really did take that long to make it true and also good. We just didn't want any sort of like throwaway rhymes that were
Just because it rhymed didn't mean it went in the book. And
Right.
it is truly a work of the heart.
Well,
I mean, you
it
can
is
tell it's
that.
truly a work of the heart.
Good
And
for
I
heart.
just want to say kudos for opening up your life, because I think sometimes you're right. We put a certain type into addiction, and it really is all classes and all
It's
folks
everybody.
it is. It really is. We are
And it is
seeing it in all professions.
correct.
Right. All walks of life.
Right. Right. I mean, doctors, nurses, lawyers. I mean, it is no respecter of men, as they say. But so after we had so we set about to work on the workbook, and the beautiful thing is it's not in rhyme. So it was miraculously a lot easier to write. But
wow.
And we were also able to keep it, we were trying initially to keep the book gender neutral and
never saying he.
And then it was like, and we finally had to give that up. But the coloring and activity book is gender neutral.
Right. So, there are some of the exercises in there, Kim, we feel so happy to introduce this. And again, it's applicable across so many. I mean, kids just need to learn this, but it's about the neuroplasticity of the brain. And Janet used this term, what fires together, wires together. And so we're trying to have as many positive neural experiences for these kids. So whether it's positive imagery, where we're saying, think about a happy place, draw a happy place. Those are very impactful experiences that you say you can always do that. But the other thing is, we know when kids are in fight or flight or in deeply traumatic experiences, there's often a detachment or
there's no ability to access that. It's cut off intentionally.
Yeah.
Fight or flight means you're cut off.
So, but there's a concern of the disassociation, which that is a coping skill that they need maybe right then. But later in life, what we're learning is so many of these coping skills that we all have. I mean, our family uses humor and deflection, instead of actually feeling a feeling or talking about hard things.
Yes.
But so disassociation has very negative impacts. So feeling
over the breadth of your lifetime. Yes.
Sure.
Letting someone like tune back into the body but then feel safe in that space. So there's a lot more exercises. So we feel very happy that these two things go together so well. But I wanted to say too on this, and this is an open invitation, that we are undertaking a study with Vanderbilt we know that these are evidence-based skills and practices that we've incorporated into the Timbi book and workbook.
Right.
But we want to have Timbi.
It's something we worked very hard on.
Yes. And, did research and studied and got feedback from people in the field like, yes, this is important. And also, is this something that can practically be done, right? And it's not like, Kim, you have enough counselors who can sit down one-on-one with each of these kids. So it's recognizing that there is such a need for something that a child can just have on their own, right? So what we say too is Timbi remains with the child and is this constant companion. There's a sense of connection. Community is so important for all of us as humans, but to feel like you're not alone in the hardest thing that you're dealing with. I'm a lifelong Al-Anoner, and I honestly don't know where I would be if I didn't have my group of people on Tuesday and Saturday. I can just sit in a room and I can be totally honest about where I am in my life, and I'm not judged. And so, some of the greatest things I've heard is kids saying, Mommy, Timbi knows exactly how I feel. For a kid who's going through this, to have that sense of connection, or to be able to, again, refer back to that story. I have people send me pictures of the kid cuddled up on the couch reading the Timbi book, or snuggling with the Timbi bear. I mean, they all love the Timbi bear.
Yeah.
So what we're starting is this study, and we'll have a training. We're thinking 4 to 6 weeks of just having modules they're all in the workbook already, but train the facilitator, and they'll get a full Timbi set. And then the participants will all get the workbook and the coloring book. And then it's going to be published by these Vandy professors. And I mean, we know it will turn out having some, evidence, some measurable.
Right. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Data.
Yeah.
Lots of agencies that are anxious to incorporate Timbi into their program have to get federal funding, and
absolutely. So you have to have this background of research, right. And you're right. It will, because kids need to see themselves, and that's what that's what books do for us, is we recognize ourselves. And for far too long, these children of addiction in the family have not been recognizable, and we've tiptoed around it. And so kudos for y'all for bringing this to light. I really feel like this is a mission that y'all are on, and so passionate about it. But what a legacy. And I do see you guys the next step and the next step. I don't think this is going to end here, because I think it's so needed. And it sounds like, the next thing and the next thing. I do want you guys, let us keep up. Let us know as you continue this journey and where it goes. And, but we'll add some links, guys, to
Please
where
Kim,
they could talk, even this study, anything that you guys, because they're going to, we're going to have listeners who are going to want to know, where can we, what can we? Yeah.
So I just have to say that Trish is, this is Trish's baby. She is, it's her mission. And she, sort of said, okay, come on.
I always say, Janet's my wingman. I'm like, get over here, girl. Come on. You want to do this?
We all need a wing. That's Laura and I, we wing it with one another. And you need that. So,
right. So for sure, this has impact. I mean, but all of my family, my sis Janet and my mother, my brother, my other sister, everybody loved Joe. I mean, he was this wonderful, dynamic, charismatic, loved our kids. He was Italian. But I mean, addiction is a robber. And I have seen the devastation that comes in a family, and I think about just it's the generational impact that this disease has, that
absolutely,
that we are recognizing. Of course, during the coronavirus, that pandemic, we stopped hearing so much about anything else.
Right.
But that exacerbated this. And now we're kind of, the news is, we're talking about other things again. And people are really, and with all these settlements now coming out with Purdue and understanding what they perpetrated against
absolutely,
a generation that we lost, and really how they help to increase the stigma and demonize someone with addiction as a morally bankrupt person. So we're here to just say, for these kids, you're not alone. There are people here for you. And the other thing that's big is to say, when people just don't want to talk about it, we're okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
And because I think when you're told, oh, no, nothing's happening, just go in the other room, or, this isn't happening, that your body and all your alarms are going off, and what you're seeing, and you're knowing what's happening. But then, sort of the grownups in charge are saying, no, this is nothing. This is totally normal. So then you don't learn to trust yourself. So we're saying that's the page, Kim, when you were holding up the book, where, when daddy is acting weird and strange, it's very intentional. His eyes are just whited out, and it's larger. It's the largest thing on the page, and the room gets dark, and Timbi's in the corner.
Yeah.
It's just a little tear. So that acknowledges,
trying not to see.
Right.
Yeah.
So that acknowledges that this is happening. But and so the other thing is the resilience. We want these kids, when you say you're good, you're loved, you're strong as can be.
It's not your fault that I kept, I thought that was so powerful. Yeah.
Right. But, Kim, it's in the Southern, isn't it in The Help, where they say, where the housekeeper said to the little girl, use good, use loved, use
right.
something. Use, and so, but that was in this girl's fiber. So we actually had some people who work with DCS. They were like, a lot of these kids, they don't feel loved. They've been removed from the home or had some trouble. But we said, but that doesn't mean they're not, and that they need to hear that, especially. That was important for us to just remind them of those things.
Guys, thank y'all. I mean, amazing. Amazing women, and you're doing such good in the world and bringing light to this problem.
As are you to just bring us together to do this.
Exactly.
So
well,
I saw you and Laura, and that's what teaching everyone, because you do everything, right? I mean, we're in a niche thing, but you're really helping kids across the board with whatever is going on with them. So I feel like we're just happy to be here with you.
Bow down to you.
And helping, thank you. And helping us with this resource that is sorely needed, because we just don't have enough for that age group,
for little kids.
For any, but it's very hard. Very hard, because the other things that we are given, and it really does not hit that youngest student. And so this is something we can use there all the way up. So guys, we'll put those links out.
Okay, great.
So glad Laura didn't get on.
I know, Laura, we want to say we missed you, but
no, did we really? Let's be honest. No, we did not.
Nope. I certainly didn't. I'd never met her. So
really, please don't. Oh, no. I was praying.
Did you hear us just talking?
I have been listening to the whole thing, and that's why I came on. No, I'm just kidding.
So angry.
I'm just kidding. I just got finished and thought I'd jump in.
We were just saying goodbye.
Yeah, we were saying how we missed you, and I was telling them they've missed the best.
She loves you.
How I love
Kim,
you.
this is recorded, Kim. Remember?
Oh, yeah. I'm just going to go ahead.
I can't wait to edit it and listen to all the great things that y'all said about
it. It's wonderful. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. You are going to enjoy listening to this, because they are amazing women. But guys, thanks for being on. Nice to meet you.
Laura,
thank you.
Thanks for popping in at the end. We missed you. I hope you're
so sorry. I have been so excited about this, and I hate that I've had
Kim she did a good job. So
mediocre. I got you.
Amazing.
2 thumbs up, Kim.
Well, you were right. Aside from the bad mouthing me, that was fantastic and such a needed resource. Like you said, there are things out there for older students, but there is nothing that speaks to what the child of someone who's in addiction might be going through. And this is that resource.
Yeah. And it's such a work of the heart. I mean, because she's lived it, and because she saw, and we're, it's like see a need, feel a need, and necessity is the mother of invention. And she knew that when she needed those resources, they were not there for her little ones, and when they were going through this. So she doesn't want anybody else to have to go through that. So, as I said, we're not getting any kickbacks from this. We just met her and loved her story and felt like that there's not a lot of things for younger kids.
Yeah.
But even a picture book can be used for older kids too. And that's why I like this, because it speaks to all ages, even adults. She reads these to adults, this picture book, and it speaks to them. So it is a good resource and has a good story. And these, it's a work of the heart. So.
Well, I wanted to stay mad at you for doing this without me, but A, I deserved it.
Yeah.
B, it was so good. I can't even be mad.
I know.
So I forgive you.
And I feel like I hope you've learned that maybe if you step back a little bit more and let me come forward,
We'll actually have some quality episodes. Yes.
I'm just saying, in a very humble way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think that's it for us because you look done. Yeah.
My eyes have closed like 10 minutes ago.
I have seen this look before.
You know this look. I am already bundled up.
Carol Miller has seen this look before whenever I've dragged you down.
Look.
Yeah.
When I'm gone, I'm gone.
I'm embarrassed all over again. All right, let's end this then. You can join our Facebook group. You can follow us on Instagram. You can rate and review our podcast because when you do that, it helps other people find us. And you can subscribe to our newsletter. We send out goodies every so often. So join our mailing list. And you can also follow us on Teachers Pay Teachers. You may not know that, but we put stuff out there every now and then on Teachers Pay Teachers. Have a good week.
Bye-bye.